Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reveal's webinar for navigating eDiscovery costs, strategies for law firms, and optimizing financial outcomes. I'm Jacqueline Murphy, a marketing content manager here at Reveal, where I'm one of the people that put together great conversations and great webinars that you guys care about. Today, I'm joined by George Socha, our very own here at Reveal, as well as Maggie and Martha. These three are such amazing speakers, and they know so much about cost recovery, especially when it comes to navigating eDiscovery cost dilemmas. So I'm excited to hear what they have to say, and I hope you all enjoy this as well. Without further ado, I'm going to pass this off to George.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for the wonderful introduction. Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar on navigating eDiscovery costs. I have with me two excellent speakers today, Maggie Diaz and Martha Laux. They bring us very different perspectives, and I will ask them in just a second to both introduce themselves briefly, who they are, what they do, and give us an overview about why they are here with us today, what it is that they bring to the table when it comes to better managing and navigating eDiscovery costs. I am George Socha. I am Senior Vice President of Brand Awareness at Reveal and have been in the eDiscovery space, over 3 decades. I lose track of how many years exactly. And for that entire time, dealing with challenges of one sort or another relating to the costs of eDiscovery. So let's start with you, Maggie, a brief intro of who you are and why we have you here today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Magdalena Diaz. I'm the eDiscovery Manager at Lewis Brisbois. Earlier this year, I reviewed pricing from several different vendors. Based on the pricing that I reviewed, I came up with a pricing model that fell within a specific price range. I then made sure that that pricing model also met our clients' needs.
And Martha?
Hi, I'm Martha Laux. I'm Director of Technology Services at McDermott Will & Emery, and I've been working in eDiscovery for a long time, like 20 years now. It's really crept up on me. So I've dealt with pricing from all different angles. I worked in, I was a paralegal in the beginning years of my career, and I was a client of various service providers. I later was working at a service provider and doing sales, and so pricing was a huge part of my day to day. And then again at McDermott, at the law firm side, we've used all of legal service providers, and we also license eDiscovery software for our own in-house operations. And we have a business unit, and I oversee our technology team and operations. So I deal pretty extensively with how we price things out and how we recover costs in our center.
We have decided to organize our discussion today in 7 different ways. Both you can see the boxes up here. We might not go over this in the order they appear on the screen, but we will take you through all of these. I'd like to start, though, at the beginning with understanding what is it really that we are talking about here with respect to eDiscovery costs. And Maggie, why don't we have you start on this?
eDiscovery costs are broken into 2 sections as technology costs and people costs. Technology cost is the money that is spent on purchasing new tools and software so that eDiscovery professionals can perform functions. People costs are the salaries that are paid to the individuals that also assist with performing eDiscovery costs, and those are lawyers, paralegals, and litigation and eDiscovery staff.
Martha, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think there's just costs everywhere you look, right? There's the operational costs that, like Maggie was describing, where we've got our team, the infrastructure, software licenses. There's costs. If I'm the client, I have the cost of those eDiscovery services, whatever is being charged to me by the service provider. And then there's the overall cost of discovery, which can go up and down depending on how we're using different tools. So I think, just depending on the position that you're in, what your bill is going to be is going to change the way that you think and view these costs. But there's cost to everything in every area. But I think, it just depends on your specific role and perspective, which costs are going to be most important for your goals and objectives.
And on that point, what are some of the different perspectives and different views into costs that folks need to deal with?
I mean, there's technology costs. So let's say I'm a client and I have a case, I'm getting into the discovery portion of the matter. I'm naturally concerned about the billable time that people are going to have to take to review the documents and get the work done. So I want to minimize that time as much as possible by using technology, but that technology is not free. So we have costs associated with data processing and data storage, and we're creating data as we're managing a case. So if I'm a client, I'm looking pretty closely at what charges are coming my way from either a law firm or a service provider. Now, in my role, we look at that and we want to make sure that we're pricing things in a way that's competitive and providing the value for our clients that we are always trying to bring. So I'm looking at market pricing. I'm looking at the expenses that we have as an organization. Like, how much does it cost to license software? How much does it cost to have the team trained up on what they need to know and to have the right types of professionals with the right experience to do some of these functions? And so it's a whole variety of different costs in the way I think about them.
I'm going to add a little bit over to what Martha just mentioned about cost perspectives. Law firms and clients see costs differently. Clients try to avoid incurring eDiscovery costs, and law firms are sort of stuck in the middle. They are always trying to convince the client on why it's beneficial to properly collect and process data. Well, the client thinks that collecting and processing data and handling all eDiscovery tasks should be a internal overhead cost.
When we think about costs, and I'm going to move to the next section now, we've got, for purposes of this webinar, 4 approaches laid out for dealing with eDiscovery costs. Maggie, why don't you start with that, and then Martha pick up with additional comments.
Well, I was trying to develop my own internal firm approach from a law firm perspective. I looked at the 4 options: avoiding, absorbing, recover, and profit. So based on the needs of the firm and the needs of our clients, I had to go with a combination of 2 approaches. And the approach that made more sense to me, of course, was avoid. But looking at our client's need, I had to come up with 2 approaches. And those 2 approaches were well accepted by our clients and also accepted by the firm.
And so, Martha, you've got probably a very different situation. But before we jump into that, I think I'm going to give just a quick overview of these 4. The basic idea with avoiding is finding you will sometimes be in a situation where your clients will tell you what platform you are going to use, what eDiscovery platform, what service providers you're going to use. They've got contracts or relationships directly with those organizations, and a bill never comes through the law firm at all. That's one form of avoidance. Another form of avoidance is trying not to do any eDiscovery. Maybe not the best approach today. Absorbing is, and this is a common strategy, which has both advantages and shortcomings, is deciding that you as a firm will treat some or all of your eDiscovery expenses no differently than you treat rent or photocopying expenses or whatever you roll into overhead. You'll roll eDiscovery expenses into overhead as well. Recovering, you hope to break even or at least get back a portion of what you spend from your clients. You might not be able to charge them for every dollar that you spend. You might only be able to get 60 cents on a dollar or 80 cents on a dollar or 20 cents on a dollar. But you try to put to place an agreement with each of your clients that allows you to pass through to them some portion of your eDiscovery costs. And then finally, Martha's firm does this, and I believe, and a number of other firms do. They have units within the firm or even wholly owned subsidiaries that deliver eDiscovery services. And within the cost of the delivery of that service are included the costs they incurred. Did I present that fairly for both of you?
Yeah.
Yes.
So Martha, let's now pick up from your perspective on these 3 or 4 approaches and how you address them.
So it's kind of interesting because although we are a profit center, so we do charge clients for some of the services that we offer. There are flavors of all of these 4 approaches in day-to-day life. So there are many instances where a client has a pre-existing relationship, exactly like you described, George, where we're not really, we're working with a service provider that the client has a contract with, and that service provider directly invoices our client. So we're just kind of working with the parties, but we're not directly involved in eDiscovery costs other than, trying to make strategically smart decisions throughout the discovery phase to keep things from getting too expensive. There are, I know, and there are many firms that absorb the costs as overhead. I think that's less common now than it used to be, and it's mostly because as data volumes have increased, and in particular over the last 10 to 15 years, things just got really big. The size of the data that we have to manage is just so large that the infrastructure to support it and the technology that we need to get through this data in a reasonable amount of time, it's just costly. It's not like the volumes that we used to see many years ago. And so I think it's increasingly difficult for firms to fully absorb the cost of eDiscovery software and resources because it is kind of costly. And so most folks that I speak with, there is a model of either some sort of recovery or profit. And we do a mix of these. There can be different reasons why you would structure it as a profit center versus just a cost recovery center. We have, we pitch and bid on work just like every other business out there, and we try to be competitive in the market. And so we kind of mix and match and combine things, and sometimes we'll try to combine services. It just really depends on what's going on. But on the whole, we do maintain a profit center because, as I mentioned, supporting the infrastructure is quite costly. And McDermott's a very large law firm. So we have a lot of cases and we're doing a lot of discovery across the board. It makes sense for this business to have the resources in-house because we have so many cases. We function like a mid-sized vendor or consultancy inside of the firm. So for the firm, it's part of its business. And, but we also do try to find ways to use our tools and services in other ways, and including for the firm's own internal purposes. Sometimes our software can be really helpful just for our own needs.
As we think about these 4 approaches, at some point, people need to choose which approach or approaches they intend to use. And we've got up here some questions to consider, some factors. Both of you have been through this process of trying to figure out where you want to fit on that spectrum, or which of the places you want to be in, really more than one. Martha, I'd say your organization, your firm is farther along in this journey probably than Maggie, your firm is, although you may just be on different journeys, and maybe that's a better way of looking at it. Let's start with you, Martha, and then go to you, Maggie, and talk about how folks in your firms go about figuring which of the approaches make sense for you.
Yeah. Well, I think it, at a core level, establishing what your goal is. Do we want to make a profit center and have this as a revenue stream, recover cost, or absorb it? We have to do a pretty thorough analysis and think about some of the factors that you have listed there, like how much work do we typically have? How many matters? Are there metrics that we could look at for vendors who have worked on different cases? Maybe we have invoices and we can see approximately how much we're spending on eDiscovery in an average year. Or maybe there's a particular client that has a lot of different needs in eDiscovery, and this is a significant client, so it makes sense for your business to centralize some of those functions inside your own organization. I think it's going to come down. There's a business decision of what level of risk the firm is willing to take, because if you're doing the work and if there's a mistake, that's something that you would need to address. There also is consideration about your upfront investment and what you will need to invest to maintain your business unit. So, like I mentioned, there's costs like software licenses and people, but you're going to need to keep those people. It's not like I can just, install a software and be finished with it. There's a lot of work that goes into maintaining this. You have to be comfortable with operationalizing certain tasks, tracking things and documenting your processes when you receive media, logging the media. There's a ton of little things that come up. So there has to be an appetite for supporting it in a way that's going to meet the quality standards that your firm has and minimizes the risk to the business. So you don't want to be spending too much money and not recovering enough if your goal is to recover or profit. And you also want to make sure that you are spending enough to deliver work at the level and the standard and the quality that you're expecting. So I think it's difficult to fully plan out and say, I'm going to do a profit center. I'm going to do just a basic cost recovery model, and it will go this way. There's a lot of different things that can come up that are difficult to predict. And I think an acceptance and willingness to be flexible and invest in this business model, whatever it is something with time and also potentially with money, is something that the organization has to be on board with. So, and this is a little bit of a vague, it's always an it depends answer, right? I mean, there's no one answer, but it's an analysis of your finances, your clients' needs, your expected business in the future, and how important it is to recover or profit from your investment.
Maggie, how about you, your perspective?
Trying to decide what approach to go with required a lot of investigation and research, finding out what our clients' needs were and what our internal firm needs were. A lot of investigation and gathering information is what allowed me to make a decision on what approach to go with. And again, one approach was not going to work for the variety of clients that we have. So I came up with a combination of two approaches based on the research that I performed, finding out, what practice groups have more e-discovery and what their data volumes are, and what practice groups have, small volumes of e-discovery. So that's how I based my approach. It was more based on practice groups, data sizes, and the client's needs. And that's how I came up with the approaches that have been implemented today.
There are a number of pros and cons to consider with each of these approaches. I'm going to ask right now about something that's not really up on this screen, however, which is that there are some key constituencies that I'm sure both of you have had to deal with. And I have three in particular in mind. One, talking about this internally and addressing this internally with the relationship partners, the ones who have the relationships with the clients, and the ones who, if you're changing from, say, an absorb approach to a recover approach, have to go to their clients and say, we're going to be charging you more money. The second constituency, I wonder what your thoughts are about, are the attorneys in the law firm who are not working on litigation or investigations, trust and estates, for example, transactional lawyers, ones who probably never benefit from eDiscovery software or services. And then third, of course, the clients themselves. So Maggie, as you were going through this, you must have been addressing these things. What lessons do you have to impart on how to approach any one of these or all three of these constituencies?
Well, clients never want to hear that they're going to incur additional costs. They want to know how can the law firm staff help the client save on costs. And if we must spend on eDiscovery, I want to make sure that I'm paying market costs or below market costs.
And for internal people, your colleagues at the law firm?
The most of the attorneys, of course, our clients dictate the decisions that are made. They are also more inclined into cost savings. So the approach that was going to be implemented was going to be the approach that would allow us to save costs, but not sacrifice the quality of the processes that were going to be applied to the eDiscovery data.
And Martha, what are your experiences? What are your words of wisdom on this?
Well, I think for people in the firm who are not our typical client, our internal clients, the folks, the M&A attorneys, or people who aren't really doing a lot of eDiscovery, I'm sure they're not really thinking about the eDiscovery business unit that often. But as a whole, for the organization of the firm, it's part of the firm's business approach to keep these services in-house so that we can respond to our clients' needs more efficiently, more effectively. We do save clients costs by having things in one spot without, bottlenecks of transferring data to other parties and back again, and just the communication challenges that come with having multiple organizations managing data in the discovery process. But our colleagues who don't really do eDiscovery are still benefiting generally from the firm having these resources in-house. As I was mentioning earlier, the software that we use, the tools that we have for massaging data, and the team that we have with their experience and skill in using artificial intelligence, databases, more generally, following good data management practices where we can defend our approach and trace our steps if we need to. These principles for how to manage eDiscovery are really helpful in other areas in the firm. So, for example, we have used our eDiscovery team and softwares, various tools, to look at data that we have in our document management system. We've prepared and made little applications that can help the M&A attorneys find similar agreements using some analytical search tools that we have. We also have team. We have people on our team who can step in and help solve problems that are new. Our folks are experienced in analyzing data and coming up with an innovative solution to a weird problem. This is day-to-day work in eDiscovery. And when people run into roadblocks in other practice areas, a lot of times they'll get referred to our team because they figure, well, the discovery people have seen weird stuff before. Maybe they know the answer. So I think there's a lot of value to having this infrastructure in-house, and we can use it outside of eDiscovery. And we have the team in place to help the firm grow in other areas, whether it's novel ways of using generative AI, something that we aren't even doing yet. We have a team of people here that is experienced at managing data in careful ways. So it's been beneficial to every group in the firm.
For both of you, several questions along these lines. One, how for people who are looking to make a transition from a situation where they have historically absorbed all their eDiscovery expenses to one where they can recover at least a portion of them. It's pretty typical to meet resistance internally, especially from our relationship partners who say they don't see it this way. What they're really saying is, I think, often, I feel like I'm already charging my client too much. How can you ask me to charge my client even more? How do you deal with, or how do you recommend people deal with that type of situation?
Yeah, I mean, I understand the feeling. I know I have felt it myself before. I'm going to sound a little harsh. Someone's paying for it. Okay. So if you're not passing the cost on, then you're eating it. Like it's somebody has to pay for it. And if the cost is too much to absorb and that's not possible anymore, if the business has decided that it's really not an approach that we can do anymore, we can't take on this level, or we're going to have to get some sort of cost recovery, it then tends to be about the usage and the need for the case. And I mean, there really isn't any free discovery. eDiscovery services just aren't free. Somebody is paying for them. And, unfortunately, we sometimes have to deliver a message that nobody wants to hear. Nobody wants to get a bigger bill. Nobody likes to see a price increase. And I think we just have to be clear about explaining that there's a lot of investment in there, and there is cost to doing this, and that it exceeds, with the data volumes, it's just a real challenge. It's a difficult conversation to have. I feel for people on that one, but maybe they could blame it on the supply chain or something.
Well, go ahead, Maggie.
I was gonna say, I agree with Martha. It's a difficult conversation to have. And again, eDiscovery that's free. It's not free, and someone needs to pay the cost. But I think that that's where we need the help of some of the relationship partners to assist with educating our clients and just informing them of the benefits and the costs associated with eDiscovery. in most of the situations I've been in, that has been very helpful.
Any comments either one of you wants to make about the pros and cons we've got up on the screen here before we move to the next section?
I think that what I'm faced with a lot is client pressure to cut costs. I've always get the question of, can this be done for less money, or is there a way that we can skip this e-discovery process? It does happen a lot.
How do you suggest folks in law firms maneuver through that, respond to that?
Again, with continually educating the clients and explaining to them the, of course, pros and cons of cutting costs, and just letting them know that it will sacrifice representation because there will be evidence that they will not be able to review and present, and that evidence can actually help them win their case.
Martha, anything you want to cover on the screen, or should we move to the next section?
I think that when we have to charge clients for eDiscovery services, whether it's data processing or other software usage or time for doing the work, it needs to be clear that this work is necessary so that it doesn't just come across as excess expenses on the bill. And even though we have to incur the cost of using the technology and storing our data, we still strive to make our approach as efficient and effective as possible. So I try to articulate this a little bit, but just it's I guess simply put, you don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish. So for example, when people say, well, I'm really concerned about costs, I don't want to spend the money to process or host this data, for example. Yes, I understand there is a cost for processing and hosting data, and there's also cost for reviewing the data. The challenge that comes up when we don't use technology effectively, we have much more manual work and the billable time increases. And if we don't use systems that are effective, we're making it more difficult for the legal team to collaborate and work together to achieve the goals of the case. So these are tools that help the attorneys meet their obligations for the client, and the client has its own obligations in the process. So I look at them as, it's like explaining using a computer, and email, where back in the 1970s, we didn't have computers in offices. We didn't have any of this stuff. But today, it's impossible to work without a computer. You have it, and it's essential. And this is a cost that we just have to have. And somebody has to pay for it, right? It just is something that's essential for doing work at the level that we need to do for our clients. So it's just it's a challenging conversation to have, but I do think that when you talk through it, you can make it clear to clients, like, although there is a cost, we are doing our level best to keep our billable time as low as possible. We're using the technology to be faster and more effective in our work, and we are not trying to, overcharge. You should bring the value and illustrate the value to the client.
I'd like if each of you could share some examples of ways in which you've been especially successful at dealing with the issue of how you, your firm, your clients can more effectively navigate eDiscovery costs?
Sure, I can kick it off with I'll give a little success story. So as you know, we do a combination of profit and recover, and the reason why we're able to do this is one of these like little practical tips that's based on details that really matters. If you want to have an e-discovery function and either recover cost or bill for the services and generate profit, you have to have a mechanism for getting that information consolidated and on the bills accurately. So when you are building out this offering, you need to think through, how am I going to get the information about, let's say, the volume of data that's been processed, or what was translated in the software, or whatever it is that you're billing for. You have to have a way of getting those metrics out of the platform, reformatted into something that's going to work with your billing system, and then onto your final invoice. So there's a lot of like nitty gritty, how do I make this happen in real life type of questions that you have to ask and answer. And we've, to speak on this, a success story, we found years back that our process for gathering these metrics for billing purposes was not nearly as efficient as it could be. And we wanted to automate it as much as we could. We have a developer on our team whose primary responsibility is building and maintaining an application that helps gather these metrics for us, and then it formats our bills in a way, it lets us change pricing. And how you bill eDiscovery is a really challenging thing to solve. I've spoken with people at service providers, at law firms, and it's always a challenge, because on some cases, maybe you're billing by the gigabyte, and on another case, perhaps there's an alternative fee arrangement that's just different. And however you do it, you have to have a practical method for execution. And I think so. I would say, in order to be successful, I would really think about how you're going to bill it, because having a person who's dedicated to making that successful and building a system to do it is one thing that's been really important for our success. We can audit what we've done, and we have confidence that our bills are accurate. So that's been very helpful for us.
With that type of approach, one of the questions I see come up regularly, and it sounds like you need to deal with this question, is that many of the tools and platforms people use are ones where you pay per gigabyte, or where you've got a fixed monthly or a fixed annual subscription. And you have to figure out how to translate that into an amount to bill on each separate matter. Sometimes it's a very difficult translation to accomplish. What have you seen that works better? What have you seen that doesn't work well with that translation? Martha, and then Maggie will come back to you.
Well, that's interesting. I have found, although people don't like billing by the gigabyte, I know everybody likes to complain about, billing by the hour, billing by the gigabyte, because a lot of your operating expenses work by the gigabyte or by a certain volume. It ends up being easier to pass through costs on that basis in some ways, because you're better able to do an apples to apples comparison. Like, let's say if I'm charged $1 per gigabyte, if I then turn around and charge somebody, let's say $2 per gigabyte, now it's $1 profit, right? But there are other expenses that you have to consider that may not be part of your per gigabyte charge. We used to do more, I guess, granular unit pricing on all of the different technology services. And a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I revamped our pricing to simplify it so that we have a discovery platform use fee, which includes all of the different functions in the software. So whether I'm doing a manual review or I'm using every artificial intelligence bell and whistle available, the cost for usage of the platform is consistent. So we don't want to penalize people by charging for the use of technology that will make their work more effective and efficient. And that's been really helpful. And simplifying the pricing and not having so many little charges has helped alleviate some of the questions that attorneys have, like, what does this mean on the bill? I don't understand why there's 5 different line items. We have a pricing summary that describes everything right up front, and there's a lot more certainty about how much things would cost. So it's made it easier for our team to estimate how much something's going to cost and what their in our billing system, we've incorporated an estimating tool so we can, at any point in time, pull the numbers and see how much data have we processed so far this month. And if we add another 100 gigabytes, what's that going to do to the bill at the end of the month? These are things that we didn't, these were things that developed over time as our group evolved and the pain points that clients were experiencing changed. So, the per gigabyte pricing model is effective and also kind of frustrating, but it's at least one fairly consistent way of measuring things. I'm not sure if I answered all of your questions there.
I think so. And let's turn back to Maggie and have her give us a success story or two to give a somewhat different perspective, and then we're going to switch to the future of eDiscovery costs.
I had to find a tool that could handle small volumes of data for those matters where a lot of eDiscovery data is not received. And I was able to find a tool that was easy to use and that it was also a per gigabyte fee tool. And I did that because I wanted to be able to provide our clients with a I would say cost certainty. I wanted to make sure that we can inform our clients ahead of time how much will it cost. Instead of giving them estimated cost with the per gigabyte cost, I was able to give them sort of a more closer estimate as to how much it will cost to host their data in that platform. And I had to work closely with our paralegals and our attorneys to make sure that the tool was easy to use and that their clients were happy with the per gigabyte fee.
Thank you. Let's have you now gaze into your crystal balls and tell us a little bit about where you think eDiscovery costs might be headed. And let's jump to Martha and then back to Maggie.
I think with generative AI, with any new technology, there's cost. My sense is, and I would predict, just like with other technologies, that Gen AI is going to be less expensive over time as demand for it grows. We'll have to see how it works out in real life. I think where generative AI comes in is going to be very interesting. We're still very early days, and I think there's going to be a lot of different ways that people price the use of tools like that, and the market will ultimately decide what is going to be the final cost and what's effective. I have a hard time seeing data volume decrease. I really think the volume is going to stay consistently pretty high. There's a lot of data sources, just more and more data sources with smartphones and collaboration platforms. There's just lots and lots of different types of data. So we'll see innovation in how people manage modern data, and we'll see different costs associated with solving those challenges. And part of that will probably be generative AI.
Before we go any further, Maggie, what are your thoughts about generative AI and the potential costs?
Generative AI is fairly new. There's a lot of concerns surrounding accuracy and pricing. I agree with Martha that it will impact pricing models. And I think that with new innovations and new technology, the pricing for some of the say processes, eDiscovery processes are also going to be affected. And my hopes are that generative AI, that the pricing is similar to what we pay for TIFFing and OCRing, because at the moment it's a little too high.
It could be, even at today's prices, though, depending on what you're doing with the generative AI, if it's expensive, but it still saves time, then it could still be very worthwhile. You know, maybe it generates a document summary that would take somebody 5 minutes to write, and now they can just review, confirm the content, and edit it, something like that. So I guess it would totally depend on the use case.
Yeah, and I think you're right. You're both right. We are in such very early days with it. I don't think anybody has no one has an established pricing model with track record for any of us to look at for this. People are just starting to roll out pricing models, and I'm sure they're going to change as well as price points, and those are going to change as well. So who knows where we're going? We have seen over the years, right now, tell me if I'm wrong, but probably the per gigabyte approach is the dominant model. Is that what you both see?
Yes.
Yeah. In the past, it's been per page, per file ingested, per TIFF image created, per user hour, per number of users. Right now we're at per gigabyte. Do you think we are likely to stay at per gigabyte for a long time to come? Or do you think yet another approach is likely to edge its way in and push per gigabyte off to the side? Any thoughts on that?
My sense is that we'll probably stick around with the gigabyte pricing. And that is because fundamentally, all of this stuff, all of the data has to sit on storage. Whether I maintain and buy those servers myself or if I'm using, cloud, I'm either buying infrastructure, but I still have to plan on a capacity. So I'm the spend on my network infrastructure. I have to buy like all of this storage to store all of my data. I have to know volume. And with the cloud, even if you get like blob storage for archiving or something like that, it's still billed by volume, by terabyte, by petabyte, whatever your units are. And so because our core business expenses are based on storage capacity, I think it's the one constant thing. I think that's one reason that will influence the per gig pricing. And the other is that kind of like the billable hour. I know there's a lot of talk over the years about billable hour going away and alternative ways of billing for services. And it can work for certain types of things, but sometimes it's really hard to predict. I just don't know how much time I'm going to need to spend to do the work that has to be done on a case. You can't always predict the issues that are going to come up. And so if you say, well, I'll bill a fixed amount, and then you work far beyond that level and you lose money, then it's not really a great business model. And it's just so difficult to predict. I've had many cases over the years. I'll never forget one time I got asked to have a couple of calls, spend maybe 2 hours on a case and just help out with a little advice on data preservation and then move on. It was going to just be a small matter. Don't even think about it. I billed more time to that case over the next 2 years than any other case. It started out small and it just ballooned into this very large case. But at the beginning, people felt very clear that it was going to be small. It's just so hard to predict that the risk of losing money because you're not accounting for the potential volume. I think it's going to be really hard to move away from volume-based pricing. It's not impossible, but there's greater risk when you divorce the pricing from the volume.
And it's not just the volume of hours spent by the folks in the law firm, it's the volume of data too. I had a similar experience where we got in what I think everyone thought was probably just going to be a nuisance value contract dispute case. Over time, it blossomed to a matter where at its peak, the plaintiffs were demanding $2.2 billion. And we ultimately had a 4-month-long trial. It was by far the largest case in terms of data that the firm I was at had ever handled, all from a nuisance value case. And if we had said at the beginning, we're just going to charge you this minuscule amount per month, we'd have all been in trouble. Maggie, what are your thoughts about this?
Can I add one thing really quick? I'll say even within a case, when I know how much data I have, let's pretend I have 100 gigs of email. We make a lot of copies in eDiscovery, so I might process that data. I'm expanding out the files during processing. I'm promoting copies to review. Now I'm imaging the document and I'm generating new files, new TIFF or PDF files, and then I'm branding it. So, I better make another copy of that before I brand it. So you can copy a file in 5 to 10 different formats by the time you're done. How many parties do you have to produce it to? So even with the knowledge of, it's 100 gigabytes of starting data, it could actually be far more in the end because of the processes that we go through. And we also don't know how much we're going to get from the other party. So it's a lot of unknowns.
Definitely. Maggie, your thoughts?
I like the per gigabyte model because it's more simplified pricing. I think that service providers with inflation are looking into ways they can make more money, right? I'm assuming that most of them are able to recover costs, hosting costs, and that's where they're going to focus on developing their price offerings. So a per gigabyte model is, and if it's an all-in model that includes user licenses, project management, eDiscovery experts, I think that model will be accepted. And I do see in the future that, I guess by the service providers, the per gigabyte model will be a model that is going to be enticing to not only law firms, but corporations.
Well, we are drawing close to the end of our time here. I'd like to switch to our takeaways and not do as we so often do, which is just give people 5 seconds each to talk about the takeaways, but give you at least a couple minutes. And Maggie, could you start with the first takeaway? And then Martha will have you finish up with the last one.
Yes. eDiscovery is constantly changing. I mean, every couple of months, every quarter, there's a new technology being implemented. For example, artificial intelligence is something that has awakened the industry. generative AI will impact our pricing and our pricing models, and that's going to prompt people like myself and Martha to look at the approaches that we have implemented, that we have worked so hard throughout these years to develop and implement, and make adjustments or just switch altogether and select different approaches.
And Martha?
I think if you were to build out, I think building out an eDiscovery offering, whether it's at a law firm, a service provider, or in inside of a large corporation that has repeated discovery needs, it's a really good opportunity to think clearly about the goals of the business unit in concert with the goals of the broader organization, and think about the value that you bring, not just in the area of discovery, but also to the organization as a whole, and how you could use the resources in your business unit to benefit clients and your organization generally. It's a thorough analysis, which is useful in its own right. Whether you go through the analysis and decide to keep things the same way, at least you have confidence in your choices and can feel comfortable that you're doing what's right for your organization. I think it's just a useful opportunity to think about, what do our clients need? What do we need? What do we want? These are actually, they're very simple questions, but they're very challenging to answer because of the different factors that you have to balance. And that balance will be different at every single organization, because every organization is different and the needs are going to change. So it can be a really fun exercise in some ways. And I think it's useful regardless as you consider how to do eDiscovery. It gives you a good opportunity to really think about what's important to your organization and to your clients, and how you will execute your and deliver on your services.
Well, Maggie, Martha, thank you so much for joining us today. I know I appreciated your thoughts, comments, and insights. I'm sure the audience has as well. Thank you again. We turn it over now to Jacqueline.
Yes, thank you both so much for joining us. It's been so wonderful, and I've absolutely loved hearing all of your conversations. It was an amazing conversation. And I want to thank all of our audience members today just for joining us. I'm be sending out a quick survey to everyone, and I would love just to hear some feedback on how you think we did, and if there's anything that we could improve for next time, and if there's any great topics that we can bring to you in the future. Additionally, if you are interested in getting a demo of Reveal's product, please, you can hit the button right here to make it easy for you. There should be a request Reveal demo button right above. Thank you all again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.